Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Fireside Chat with author Sue Tsigaros. Sue, welcome to our Fireside Chat. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Jenny. It's wonderful. It's very warm here in Sydney, Australia this morning.
Indeed. Today is 17th of March, and your book, Inspired Connections, has hit Amazon stores. How does that feel?
Oh, it's so exciting. To actually be a published author. Wow. Amazing.
Congratulations.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
Mm.
And so, if everyone's keen to get a copy of their book, this is the link that you can hit. And the moment you get there, it will take you to the Amazon store that's in your country or local to you, and you get a copy of your book from there. Now, let's get back to Sue. Sue has written this beautiful chapter for Inspired Connections called The Eyes of Light, Illuminating My Pathway to Purpose. Before we get into the questions with Sue, I'm going to read her bio to you. It's a fascinating bio. Sue is known as the elder wise woman space holder. Her background includes psychology and business, as well as a lifetime of spiritual and personal development, strongly influenced by her time with Osho. She has worked as a psychology and group work teacher, spiritual disciple, meditation center leader, corporate sales executive, executive coach, consultant, business mentor, board member, and transformational facilitator over a career spanning more than 40 years. The next decade is about embracing eldership. And Sue loves to be the go to person for those special female leaders, pioneers, facilitators, and light bearers who are looking for a deep listening, anchoring, and space holding resource. She empowers the strong female leadership presence and influence in key decision making roles. Healing, growth, nourishment, and creative problem solving are activated, helping transition this beautiful planet and its communities of all species towards a more balanced and harmonious future. Sue is passionate about supporting and guiding emerging and established women leaders to come home to themselves and feel fully embodied and alive in their being. She does this through collaboration in groups as well as tailored and individual coaching programs. Throughout the interview, we're going to share the links on how you can get in touch with Sue. For today, we're going to focus on her chapter. Sue, firstly, for those who are listening, who is Osho?
Who is Osho indeed? What a great question, because the question that he always throws to everyone is, who am I? Who are you? Who are we really? And there is no who, there is no I, ultimately.
What does that
Who
mean?
do we think he is a different question. I
So
guess
it's
it
the
depends what
perception of
media
who
you...
he is.
Sorry?
Is it the perception that we have of who he is?
I think there's a widely held perception that that is generated through media articles and so-called documentaries and things, which reflects small fragments. It's a bit like looking in a part of a mirror, but you don't see the whole picture. And to have actually lived in the community as I have, and to have been closer to him, and actually had short conversations with him and listened to many, many, many of his discourses and done the meditations. For me, he has been one of my ultimate teachers and a really strong reference point for me at various times in my personal growth journey to really get things into perspective, take courage to take the next step, learn to love myself, learn to be aware of the interconnectedness of things. So much of what he taught, because it was actually coming from an enlightened perspective, we don't always get it at the time when we first hear it. So the name that he gave me, for example, was one of those things. I didn't even like my name when I first got it. And it took me many years to actually realize what it meant. But that's a reflection of my own personal journey. So what is he? He's a joker. He's a jester. He's a finger pointing to the moon. But he's not trying to say, I'm the moon. He's never tried to say that.
Gorgeous. Wow. Before we started the interview, I was sharing with Sue, I was in a dark place in ashram, and the book that I found there was on Osho. And it was the first time I realized all the things that I didn't understand or know about love that I really needed to know. And that for me in itself was mind boggling. What were some of the, like, if you think about the top three things, or even the best thing that you discovered as a result of being with that enlightened being? What was something that was revealing for you?
It changes every day. It explains a lot of things about my experiences of life. It helps me understand why I've always been a dancer. It's been extremely validating to know that the instinct that I've always had, which is to expand my consciousness and my understanding into at a universal level, as well as to fully know and go deeply into my body experience, and also to really deeply connect with others, and to have that courage to be available to deep connection. At the idea of surrender, to actually say yes to something when you're kind of in a place of resistance, and knowing how to discern when that something is actually in your best interests. So there are so many lessons. I can't even say one thing. It's just the total richness of living a full life, of really, I guess, just recognizing the blessing of your life.
Wow. Recognizing the blessing of your life. That is profound. That is profound. In your chapter, there's one phrase that particularly stood out to me, and it says, you're describing someone, you say, where they're embracing their willpower with velocity.
Yes.
How is that? How you live your life?
Some people would say so.
Have you always been Sue who embraces, her willpower with velocity? Is that how that allows you to dance? That's allowed you to have such a prolific career?
When I'm in an expanded mode and I'm feeling free and giving myself full permission, yes, I do. And if I'm energized, if I'm sick or not very well or too tired, no, I can't. And that's okay. And have I at times tried to push myself to prove to other people that I'm a real go-getter? Yes, I have. And has it hurt? Yes, it did.
Boy, did it kick butt.
Boy, did it kick back. Oh, yeah. Actually, the person that I was referring to, in one of my inspired connections that I was referring to in that part of the chapter, is a woman called Tsigaros. Beautiful, beautiful lady. And I'm actually running a masterclass for women around emotional intelligence in leadership. And we're doing this together at the end of April in Sydney. We actually met at a professional development workshop for one of the personality profiling tools that I use. So we were both in this class. We connected. I found out that she was a global head of HR for a pharmaceutical company, big leader. And she was in her transition time. She was ready to leave the corporate world and move into her own consultancy. And I became her career mentor at that time. Right. So I worked with her as a client. And in my mind at that time, with my ego at that time, like, she is my client. So what happened was, because she has so much leadership capability and such big vision and such strong motivation, she embraced with velocity. And, the next time I saw her, she's speaking on a stage, which I thought I kind of should have had a go at that. And, the old green-eyed monster comes out, and I did this thing that I'm so ashamed of when we were connecting with others at this same event around one of the conference tables, and I languaged myself in such a way that people would notice that I used to be her coach, and it was really her moment, and that was such poor behavior on my part. and really reflecting such a level of insecurity in myself. And, to admit that to you right here on the podcast, it's a little vulnerable, I have to say.
Totally.
But
Yeah,
this is
totally
the
get
sort of
that.
thing we do to each other as women. This is the sort of thing that goes on all the time. And so fast forward 10 years later, I've been invited, this is last November, I was to speak at a seminar, a 2-day event around which a national event in Australia for women leaders. And I was running a couple of breakout sessions for smaller groups at the conference. And the topic was emotional intelligence and empowered presence. So I was really looking forward to that. Had all my prep done and, great, rock and roll. Let's find some new clients. Let's meet some people, blah, blah. So the morning of the actual event, I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed.
No.
I was so sick. I did the rat test and I tested positive for COVID. So there was no way that I was going to be able to go to this event on that very morning. Who was the first person that came to my mind that I knew could represent me adequately at that event? It was her. It was Tsigaros. And as luck would have it, fortune, universal support, whatever you want to call it, she was on a train to the city that morning to see some other clients, and she had a break in between around about the time when our breakout rooms were scheduled. So Brilliant. I was able to, the last thing I did before I collapsed into bed and sweated for the next 4 days was, with the COVID, was actually hand her over, introduced her to the event manager, gave her a briefing, and off she went. And she did a fantastic job. And our breakout session was the most popular session at the whole event. So we realized that there's a strong appetite for this information and for these skills. And as a result of that, we're now collaborating and putting forward this beautiful masterclass that we're offering. And we're doing marketing together, and, we've formed a partnership. So that's an example of an inspired connection. From the very get-go, there was an inspiration for us to connect. Then during the process of it, she got a lot out of it. I got a lot out of it at that early stage. And then there was this weird period. And sometimes that can happen in relationships. The ego comes in and it gets tested. And, thanks to Osho and all of my spiritual training and my dance practice that I still do and everything, I'm able to process that rubbish faster and faster and faster these days. And so what I love to do for the women that I work with is help them to process their rubbish a lot faster, so that they can be free to make the connections that are actually going to help at a more universal level. And it's part of growing up as a woman, I feel.
I totally resonate with that. Many points in that story. And thank you for being so vulnerable on this interview. For you to take ownership of what happened in that session where she was on stage. And we all have that little green eyed monster, occasionally, shucks, I should have taken my own advice. and then now you're able to come to the stage where you're having such a profound very significant shift in the relationship that's completely up-leveled the dynamic, the power and the frequency, because you gave, as you say on your board behind you, permission. You gave yourself permission to go beyond what the ego wanted to keep you playing safe at.
Yes.
And go, you know what, let's go beyond this. Let's figure out.
Yeah.
And through the universe giving you a good, let's get you in bed as well. A little bit of a nudge, a universal nudge.
A universal nudge from my sickbed. Please help me out here. And she went and did it. And they gave me a small fee for my involvement, which I passed on to her directly. And when we had our debrief later was when I told her that story. She didn't even know. And even on the day when that thing happened back then, 10 years ago, no one really noticed it. Like, she didn't notice it. It was probably not noticed or it might have been slightly picked up by others. Some others might have got an impression of me as being somehow a bit up myself or whatever, but maybe not. We don't know. But it meant something to me, and it meant something to our relationship. And I think it's just so important for us to we don't have to whip ourselves, but we do need to cultivate the awareness of when we're being fake, when we're acting out of insecurity, when we are not loving ourselves fully.
Yeah.
And when we learn to love ourselves fully, we can really, truly extend that love to others. You know, I think women are taught from a very early age, or have been. I hope it's not still happening universally, but we were taught from a very early age to be good girls, to consider others, to put others first, and to model the nurturing, loving, caring side of our nature, which I do believe is a spontaneous thing. It can be expressed in a spontaneous way, but I think we're often taught that you do it whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And that is what leads to the fakeness. And when you've got another energy operating deep down, it's like a volcano. It will burst out. It will burst out at the most inappropriate moments. And we actually have a part of the personality profile that I use that shows people where they're likely to burst out and how
Very
they
cool.
and what's the underlying mechanism that makes that happen. And so we can actually get right in there and nail it. And
This is fascinating. You know, I was just thinking about what you said. You know, we've been taught as women that love is obligation and duty. Right? That's how we show our worth, by serving, by protecting, by nurturing, by creating this harmonious environment for the family. That's the role of the women, the central role of the women. And in some, the only role for a woman. Whereas we are so much more than that, so much beyond that. And there is this tipping point, as you talk about, where everything else that's beneath the volcano is bursting to come out. So how do you help women? Is that the process of let's not let it burst, or let it burst and then I'll help you through it? What do you exactly do there?
Let's create a situation where you can burst safely without collateral damage. And let's investigate and explore and understand what just happened, and why did it happen, and what did you really need, and what had you already needed, and how can we give you that? How can you get that for yourself?
Right.
So when you are actually getting what you need and you're feeling abundant, there is such joy in nurturing others. I do believe that, you know, most of us, or practically all of us, I guess, we're all healers by nature. You know, when you think about, I'm going on a little tangent here, so feel free to pull me back. When you think about herbal medicine, how on earth did human beings ever learn to use these things for these healing? I'd be curious to know how you think we learned it. But one of the things that I'm aware of is that when you're available, when you're fully available and you're with nature, when you're in nature and you're with nature, the plants make themselves known. They generate essences, they have textures, they have aspects of themselves which are automatically appealing and naturally appealing. And there'll be certain foods that you want to taste when you've got certain things going on in your body. And I feel that it's the relationship with nature that was fairly clear and obvious. And sometimes people would make a mistake and it could be fatal, but they would learn that. And over thousands and thousands and millions of years, we've all adapted and we've all learned, and we kind of instinctively know what foods we need to eat at any particular time and what herbs might be helpful, or if you need a certain type of oil for something. And we do actually, we can feel into this if we learn how to tune in. And I happen to think that women are particularly good at this. I know that men can also be very good at it. And I do know that, from what I understand of the male consciousness, is they are often quite outwardly focused and linear. And I'm not saying it's a blanket statement, don't get me wrong, because I like the yin yang. There's masculine and feminine in everyone, right?
Yes.
And so to that extent, we all have the capacity for healing. We all have the capacity for visioning. But I also think that because of our bodies, the way our bodies are, we have more water in our bodies, we have more fat in our bodies, we have monthly cycles, we have hormones, we have a lot more complexity. And that complexity is actually connected to nature, the cycles of the moon and all of that. And so we are really, really well set up
for that interconnectedness.
For that interconnectedness.
And which is why we tap into a certain understanding.
Yes.
A certain ability or capacity to explore and to discover.
We can. And when we do this in an enlightened sense, in a sense of full permission, we can create incredible things, as many women are doing around the world right now, because it's rising. It is actually rising, and it gives me goosebumps to say it, but it really is. And we want to be collectively a part of that rising. And I don't mean that as a revolution. I don't mean it in the sense of going to war or anything like that. It's simply the permissioning. The unfortunate side of, what we've just agreed on about how women are kind of well positioned to have that relationship with nature and with healing and with caring, it kind of got categorized as, oh, well, that's what you do, and that's over there, and that's down there. And it became devalued because it wasn't able to be monetized. It wasn't able to be written in terms of the kinds of thinking and structures that a lot of the patriarchy would like to explain things. And it wasn't easy to control. You couldn't control someone who was that creative, and so naturally we've suffered, right? Our gender have suffered over many, many years. And I think, with all the iterations of various movements that have been created over the years, it's great for awareness. And that's what we need to learn. We need to capture the awareness and keep integrating it at a more and more enlightened level. Because if we keep getting locked into polarities and locked into fighting and locked into all that expression of trauma in a way that is not conducive to a positive outcome, we're not going to progress. I understand that when we're healing from trauma, we have to be able to cathartic. We have to be able to point fingers. We have to. It's a part of our evolution. But one of the really important aspects of healing from trauma is also understanding and forgiving. And I don't mean to impose that at a stage when people aren't ready for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right. What I'm hearing, and I resonate with parts of it. I'll probably have to watch this replay later. Is the part of the process for us is, and I've seen this especially throughout the history of women. We've only started understanding the history of women in these last 5 years. I mean, now we're really digging it up. We're going back to the times of the Egyptians and even further back to see where have women played a significant role in society, right? We've been contributors, and we've not been just domesticated helpers or work women in the kitchen. That wasn't our only and primary or perfunctory role. But when we trace back the history of women, all the texts were burned. They were deleted. They were scrubbed off walls. So we have really maybe the last 300 years to tap on, at best. 300 years of the history of women. No.
Have you ever seen some of those archaeological findings from the Mayan culture and the old ruins in the Greek islands? I've been there and I've seen them. And I've seen actual clay pots with images of women going to battle in chariots. There are images of women as the administrators and the decision makers, and men doing work in the fields.
There's this reversal of roles based on
very different roles,
right? So there are these cultures where women played a dominant role, where women were the key decision makers. But because the history of women was, culled,
yes,
so that we could be set up to perform certain roles only that fed the need of the patriarchy, some of us might call it, to us to now come into the space where we get to tap into a relationship with ourselves.
Yes.
Have a true inspired connection with ourselves, because now with this knowledge we go, okay, the blinders are off.
Yes.
The women before me now give me the permission to do what I need to do. That helps.
So grateful. I mean, like,
Yeah.
how much gratitude can you feel and compassion can you feel for all of those, and when we allow ourselves to go deeply into that, and look, I'm not the only person that talks about this. There are many, many people, and I love to go and collaborate with other facilitators who are doing this in a sense of psychodrama or dance therapy, or like where it's really in action. We actually enact generational trauma healing and all that sort of stuff. It's just so rich and wonderful. So I keep on wanting to emphasize, it's not just me talking about this. I'm giving you a little perspective on what I've discovered and how I work.
It's gorgeous.
I just really want to acknowledge that. But also, when we develop that compassion for all those women that have been before, it includes our mothers.
Yes.
It includes our grandmothers. And then at the same time, we still all have work to do around our relationship with our mothers and how it's either helped or not helped.
Yeah.
The way we are acting in the world now. And it's this thing of we're all responsible, but no one is to blame.
Yeah.
We are all responsible and no one is to blame.
To come into the fullness of ourselves.
Yes.
The invitation, what I hear in your voice, in your message, the invitation is, there is this collective human consciousness that you now can work with, can tap into. The human consciousness. There is the human knowledge. There's also the human consciousness, which is also as powerful as human knowledge, just only based on facts and truths. But this is a wider, deeper knowing truth about how the world vibrates and moves and loves. And it goes beyond that as well. And now for women who want to work with you, who read your chapter, they're going to ask themselves, what is it that I want to do as an emerging leader, as an experienced leader? What do I get to tap into beyond what I know? What do I get to heal within me that allows me to give permission to myself so that I can raise my consciousness? I can fully embrace who I am. And I see that, in your chapter, when you talk about this expanded yearning. Is that what you're working towards, or helping women to discover their expanded yearning?
Yes. It's what do you really, really want?
Not to quote the Spice Girls.
No. Really. What is it? I know what it's like to be numb. I know what it's like to be numb from performing so well for so long for so many others.
Yeah.
And it's very sad to get to the point where you're so numb that you don't even know what your true values are. You don't know what you stand for. You don't even know what you want to order from the friggin' menu. All you can do is eliminate, I can't have that, I can't have that, better not have that. I mean, what do you actually want?
Yeah.
For goodness sake. And a lot of women these days are giving themselves permission to go on retreats. Let's spend a weekend away doing some yoga and being with nature. Let's go on a 5-day jaunt somewhere. And no, I'm not going to be guilty because I'm spending $3,000 or $4,000 on myself.
Because I'm freaking worth it.
Yes. So it's time, because until we take that space to open up and tap into what is our deeper yearning, open up to that fullness of our yearning.
Yeah.
And when we do open up, and this is what a lot of the manifesting work is really about, the ask and it is given.
Yeah.
That full yearning is the ask.
Yeah.
And it's a vulnerable place to be.
Yeah.
Because you can't see how it's going to happen. You don't have a straight line. You don't have any guarantees. You don't know what it's going to take.
Yeah, totally.
This is when it's a life path.
Yeah.
But when I'm working with people and we do this, we do it incrementally in a way that has certain steps involved. So we discover what are you bringing, where have you been, what's lit you up, what decisions did you make and how did you make them. We discover the dynamics of the personality. We look at the values. We understand the patterns that take you out. And we do all of this with no judgment. And quite often there's a lot of reclaiming of beautiful things that happen in that discover. And then we move into design. Now let's imagine what this could look like if we had all of my criteria for satisfaction fully aligned. If I was in
check,
a really
check.
Yeah, if I was in an aligned place, what would this look like?
Yeah.
And we look at various scenarios that could be possible. And then we go into a phase of delivery. So discover, design, deliver. So in the delivery, we're actually putting into action, we're making choices and we're taking action and we're learning from it, making choices, taking action, learning from it, and cultivating the presence and the listening to receive what's actually coming. Because once you've done that first stage of the really deep work and you're starting to imagine, when you're starting to imagine your scenarios, by that stage, you're actually co-creating, whether you realize it or not. And you move from that kind of co-creation into a physical expression of that co-creation by taking the step and feeling into what's happening. And it's an awesome process. And, people find that this is where all the serendipity starts to happen.
Yes. I can feel the aha and the peace that follows.
Yes, it is. It's so peaceful.
Yeah. Because you're in alignment.
Yeah.
You're in alignment.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Like you come out from a really good chiropractic session and you can move your neck and things like that. So it's kind of like your life can feel like that.
Oh, we want that moment every time, don't we? As women, where where we feel fully liberated in our beautiful essence of who we are, in this power that is beyond measure. And we want to see those opportunities in our lives, and we feel that sometimes we're waiting for someone to go, hey, come on, it's your turn now. When actually what we need to do is do that for ourselves. Hey, it's your turn now. Come on, let's do this. I've got you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's a great place to finish, isn't it?
Yes.
It's your turn now.
Yeah. Sue, thank you so much for being on this session today. It's been such an amazing interview. Even before we started talking, people were like, oh, you and I, we're going to crack open a few bottles of wine at this rate. It's what an honor. And for everyone who's watching, get in touch with Sue. Her links are irisgroupcoaching.com. This is what it is, where you can find her. And she's also offering a coaching session to you. So go to her website /contact and you'll be able to access that wonderful session with Sue. If this is what you're vibing to and you want to work with a woman who understands how to get you to your place where you're just vibing in your purest essence, go for it. Sue, thank you so much. And congratulations again on being an author. What a highlight. What a trip to see your work out there.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm just loving this, and I'm so glad that you're my interviewer today. And thank you for your skillful questioning and your beautiful listening and the way that you mirror back what you've received from me. I find that very enriching. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Bye, everybody.